The dreaded headset. Actually, let me just turn it off.
All right, audio. Is this better? It's a little detail. Sorry, I've kind of been living on the headset today. So give me a quick comment if this audio is better. All right, good. Sorry. Had my headset on in the other room. Okay, so I want to talk about rates. It's awesome. All right, good. You guys can hear. So I want to talk about rates. I want to share with you guys some interesting things that I did today, and I hope that it's insightful because it's probably a little bit maybe different than what I typically hear people talk about when they do videos on rates. Headset was better. I can put the headset back on. If the headset was better. Hang on, we can do that. So I want to share with you guys. So we've got some trucks scattered kind of all over the country, everywhere from the south to the northwest to the east coast. A couple in the middle. All right, headset's better. All right, fine. All right, do we have the audio? Do we have the audio piece of this? Where we're 3 minutes into this or whatever? I can't even get audio. Okay, good. So we have the audio squared away. So I want to talk about rates. I want to share with you guys some of the stuff that I found out today, some of the things that I did that might be valuable to you guys when you are looking to book rates. Okay, so last week we moved trucks quite a bit across the country, Midwest, some down into Laredo, up to the Northwest. We've got, like I said, some trucks in Arizona, running out of Phoenix, as well as down by the border. We did some Hidalgo, some Laredo. We did Pennsylvania. We did pretty much everything except for kind of the far southeast. Rates were good last week. We got really good miles for all of the drivers, and we had really, really strong revenues associated with virtually every one of those runs, excluding the truck up out of the Northeast. The caveat there was that driver had a doctor's appointment over in Michigan, so we took a lot of short runs for that particular driver. Last week, Pennsylvania area was pretty soft. All right, so we jumped whatever, since Friday. So just a couple of days. What's changed? A lot has changed, at least in theory, and I want to talk about that little in theory piece is what I want to talk about. So we typically use some load boards that are kind of carrier specific, the JB Hunts and those kinds of things. But primarily we use truck stops, internet truck stop, and DAT load board. All right, so I'm sure that's probably the vast majority of what everybody else uses. Relative to truck stops and the DAT, we sort of have the all-you-can-eat package, so we do have access to a lot of the analytics and the data, so on and so forth. Rates today were massively different than they were on Friday. What happened? Did the volume of freight drop? No. In fact, if you guys want to throw in a couple of quick examples of where you're at, a couple of cities, I'll do some quick searches on freight and what it looks like tomorrow. Our trucks kind of, again, scattered across the country. There were hundreds of loads of freight where each one of these trucks are positioned. Hundreds, in some cases, many hundreds of loads of freight. So freight volume has not dropped, right? So why, on average, I would tell you guys that I saw a difference in pricing today of, on the low end, about 25%. On the higher end, probably the low 40% drop in the price of rates. So what happened, right? Two things happened. One, I called a broker that we deal with and made an offer. Now, just so you know, when I look at a lot of this stuff, I'll go into DAT and I'll do the quick 15-day average and take a snapshot. I'll do a fair amount of analytics on pricing. I'll actually look at the freight that's coming out of the area where the truck is at. I also look at the quality and the amount of freight. By quality, I mean pricing of the freight in the area that the truck is going to.
So for example, if we're going to move a truck from Spokane over to Cincinnati or somewhere on the East Coast, I don't just look at the rates out of Spokane. I go ahead and look at the rates out of the area that we're coming to make sure that, if I blend those two runs together, what's it going to look like? Am I going to, put that truck in a really bad place? Oftentimes, I'll even take that a third step, and I'll look at some of the rates out of, say, the East Coast. As they step out, what does it look like? So, what was interesting is most of the prices, like again, were somewhere between 25 to 40+% lower than they were Thursday, Friday. However, the amount of freight was as much, if not more, than there was on Friday. Again, that's not atypical for a Monday. So why the lower rates? I can't help but suggest that, or at least it appears to me, that this is just straight up manipulation by a lot of the brokers, right? I mean, we're nowhere close to February, and the volume of freight is still really significant. So I don't see really any real significant reason why that's going on. I'm going to share with you a conversation that I had with a broker. So as you guys, if you speak to brokers, oftentimes you'll call in, and the broker's got individuals that are helping them. This was the case on this particular call. It was a load from point A to point B. We had talked about averages, and they had, I think their offer was about $2,100 less than what the 15-day average was, and $2,300 or so, or $2,400 less than what I was offering. And I sort of chuckled at his offer, and I said, "Boy, that's a pretty significant difference considering we just took that run less than 7 days ago, and you guys are wanting to drop the rate pretty significantly." And he said, "Well, we're moving these all the time," kind of a thing. And it's like, well, you weren't moving them last week for that, right? I got a bunch of calls on that truck last week in this particular area. All the rates were sort of in that same vicinity. I said, so long story short, I said, look, that's not a good enough rate for us. I said, I don't think we're going to buy that. And I said, I actually mean buy it, because that's pretty much what you're wanting us to do. And so I just kind of chuckled. He kind of chuckled as well. And he went to hang up the phone. And I could tell he was on a headset. And as he's laughing, you could hear I assume it was the broker, say, did they take it? And he said, no. He said, no, the guy's exact words were, they're not buying it. And they laughed about it. So, you can't help but understand that these guys are in it to make a profit, just as we are on our side. But things do get a little egregious when you start cutting rates 25 to 40%. Now, as many of you guys know that follow the channel, we are also a shipper. And so I did two things today to sort of test the market. I prefer to try to book a load about 36 to 48 hours before that truck is moving. I do that because when I'm moving a large number of trucks, at least for me, I want the driver to have the information, be able to route plan accordingly, look at their fuel stops, weather, all those sorts of things. Oh, by the way, if some bad thing happened to a truck or to that load, it gives us a little bit of extra time to kind of cover our tail on the back end if we have to find another load. So a couple of things happened today. I quickly realized that kind of looking 2 days ahead of time was kind of silly. And so we're going to have to wait. So I actually posted a couple of trucks in some of the markets that we have trucks currently doing some resets or things of that nature. I posted them as available today. In every, so I think I did that with 4 different locations. In 3 of the 4 locations, well, actually with 2 of the 4 locations, within 20 seconds of clicking submit or upload that truck posting, my phone was ringing. And I was asked if we had a truck available. And so we had the conversation, and I was really curious what the rates were looking like. Not surprisingly, the rates were looking like what they did last Wednesday, last Thursday, last Friday, right? They were $2,000+ more than what the rates are being offered, for tomorrow or for Wednesday. So what that tells me is that the freight is still pretty significant. The need for trucks in those particular areas are still rather significant. It's just, if you're going to be booking more than the day of, which I think most of us probably prefer to do. I know a lot of you guys have the ability to wait until kind of the last second, just try to move the hot loads. That's fine if that's your stick. For me, I try to do it a little differently. But what that implies to me, guys, is that the market isn't quite as, I'm not saying that the market is not going to get soft. I'm just saying, as of right now, this moment, today, The next couple of days, it's probably not that soft. When I look forward a couple of days and some of the areas that I'm seeing, I still see a pretty noticeable amount of freight posted on the load boards for Wednesday, and today's Monday, right? And that's a decent litmus test as to what's coming out, right? And so when I see, 70, 80 loads posted, 50, 60 hours ahead of when that freight is to be moved, again, that sort of implies that there's still plenty of volume. So here's the last thing I did. There was a broker that we have a relationship with. As you guys know, we're a shipper, and so we use some brokers on occasion to move some of our outside freight. We have some I don't know, relationships with probably 10 or 15 brokers, maybe not 15, probably 8 or 10 brokers that we've used over the years to move some of our freight, our flowers. One of those brokers, not the specific individual, but the company, had a run that I had called on. Same thing, it was about 33% less than I had expected it to be. And so after I hung up the phone, I thought, you know what, this will be really fun. Let me, and it was actually, I'm moving out of Kansas City. That run that I looked for one of our trucks, it was going outbound Kansas City. And so I picked up the phone and I called the broker and I said, hey, we have a load that we're going to be looking. It's an intercompany load of some plastics and things of that nature. It's going to weigh about this much. And it's going to go from here to there. What would you guys bid on that run? Oh, by the way, here to there was the exact same location that I just called on that load that I think they were offering at $1.75 or so a mile. That same broker that offered me somebody else's run that was far heavier than what I was suggesting, that was willing to pay $1.75, was willing to charge us over $4 a mile. In fact, I think it came out to like $4.18 or something like that. So same broker. So I said to the broker, well, hey, I'm confused. I thought now since I'm hearing all the rates are softening, that we could get a little better deal on that. Well, no, I mean, rates really aren't that soft, there. Now, again, 5 minutes before that, I'd had a conversation with somebody else within their company where they were saying, oh, the rates are really soft. So that's a long-winded way of saying I think there's just a lot of broker manipulation and BS. As you guys have heard me oftentimes say on some of the videos, you're obligated to ask and they're obligated to say no. I think this is just the broker's way of they are obligated to post a rate that's significantly lower. And you're obligated to take it if you want or to back away from it and wait for something that's more realistic. Now, it's not like we have 100 trucks running all over the place. We don't. But nevertheless, we do have a decent enough sampling size as I've dealt with and looked at tons of loads and a lot of phone calls and what have you over the last week and a half or so. So Tommy, I don't think it's going to get better, to be candid. Look, guys, February is the F word in our industry, literally and figuratively. It is the worst month of the year. For you, if I was a lease operator or an owner operator, I would work my brains out, and that last sort of week of January and February, I would take a vacation somewhere far away. Right? I just wouldn't be putting miles in my truck at close to break even kind of numbers, and I just wouldn't do it. I don't see the value in it. And if I were in that situation, that's what I would do. Our situation is different, right? We have company drivers that rely on us to do exactly that, right? So it's not something that I love, certainly. I mean, anybody that knows me knows that I'm incredibly tight. So I don't like to do stuff and take risks without a decent financial reward. And certainly February does not offer that in our space. But I just thought that would be some interesting data for you guys. Again, when I call the same broker that was shipping a load and they tell us that it's going to be $4.18 or so cents a mile, and 5 minutes before that I called on a load picking in the same city, going to the same city, weighing significantly less, or excuse me, their load was weighing significantly more. They wanted to pay about $1.75. I'm not saying that all the brokers do that. We got a load this afternoon that was fair. I mean, it was really fair pricing, and it was a smaller brokerage, and so I appreciated that. So we're gonna we took that opportunity, and So I guess my suggestion to you guys is really know what your costs are. Look at some of the averages. The brokers look at the same data, guys. I mean, that's the same rate. That's the same rate info that they often look at, right? Spend a few minutes and do the research on the load that you're taking, as well as it's going, and stand firm. And unfortunately, this might mean we have to wait until the day of to move some trucks, right? I'm fortunate. I was thinking about this a little earlier. I'm fortunate because some of our guys are coming off of resets over the next couple of days. And man, I forgot to turn my phone off. So it means we have some guys coming off of resets, and quite frankly, they don't come off until kind of middle of the day. So that gives me the morning to field calls to see what's going to be real and what's good. So I might suggest that you guys might do some of the same stuff, right? Because again, when it gets to the day of, and after kind of the morning rush, and we got into the mid morning to late morning, I started receiving calls and rates started to build up. I did receive probably 4 brokers had called me offering a rate earlier that I declined. I did make them an offer. And guys, let me just say this. If you're going to take the time to do the research and make a call to a broker, and they're going to give you some ridiculous offer, again, they're just trying to make a whole lot of money. You can't begrudge them for that. But don't get mad and just hang up the phone, right? What I did is said, hey, that doesn't work for us. And here's why. I kind of sold them on the value, sold them on how good our drivers are, how well they're going to communicate, some of the things they're going to do so that they don't have to babysit, just like I would on every other load. And I made them my offer that I thought was a fair and reasonable offer. If I would have just hung up the phone or said whatever to them, I'm probably not going to get a call back. And like I said, in a handful of occasions, these guys called me back with an updated rate or a different load that was kind of in similar areas that they had a little bit more money in, right? I don't think we ended up taking any of those kind of second or one guy actually called back 3 different times. We ended up not taking any of those, but I can guarantee you that some of you guys, those rates might have been something that worked for you, right? And so I wouldn't just cuss them out, slam down the phone. Be professional, stay in there, give them an offer, and let them know if something changes. Give them your number, give them your MC, that sort of stuff, right? So that's kind of my 2 cents. All right, let me jump up, try to address a few questions. So we did finally get all of the audio worked out. So the volume increases. A lot of the freight got moved from Friday and Saturday to today. Very well could be the case. Tommy says he called on 38 loads today. Every one of them were gone when I called first time on a Monday ever. Look, I can tell you this. You're going to see a lot of that. I mentioned the other day, the acronym FUD, right? Fear, uncertainty, and doubt. You can absolutely tell, and you can see it by the call volumes and things of that nature, no doubt. You can also see on some of the load boards that you can place a bid on. You can see, and this is the thing. This was the thing I guess was most mind blowing for me. So as I was looking at some of the load boards that you can post an offer, not only do you see your offer, it'll tell you how many other bids there are, and it'll show you what those rates were. And in most cases, right, the bid may have started out, whatever, pick a number, right, $7,500, and the 2 or 3 odd bids later, it was down to 7,000 or what have you. But guys, there were a handful of loads that I looked at. They tended to be in that $2,000 to $3,000 range, and some of those loads, honestly, guys, were offering like $3,000, and like the second or third bidder was offering to do it for like $1,700. Most of the bids were around $3,000, it's like 3,000, 2,900, 2,800, and then some guy jumps in and offers 1,700. You're like, wait, what? What? I mean, look, maybe there's an emergency, guys got to get home. Who knows, whatever. But that was, I mean, and there was a handful of those, right? It's not like that was just like a one-off. I mean, there was a handful of those where guys are just going in and offering some really silly rates. Now, again, when everybody talks about cheap freight, what is cheap freight? Well, cheap freight, there is no real answer for that, right? Some guys can manage their business really, really well. have trucks and trailers that are paid off, their cost per mile or cost per run is significantly lower than guys that are driving, brand new trucks and trailers and things of that nature, right? So cheap freight varies for everyone. That's the value of candidly, of making kind of the most right decisions you can make when determining, when you're buying a truck or leasing a truck, what to get. But man, there were some really strange things that I saw. Spectre says there've been a lot of ghost loads showing up. In theory, manipulate the saturation ratios. Could be. I did see a handful today. Um, and I don't, not to bag on TQL. TQL is probably most well known for doing this. They've got a load from whatever Cincinnati, going somewhere, and they'll have 38 loads posted. With all the cities, within 150 miles around Cincinnati. Right. I did see a little bit of that. But for the most part, and again, I was sort of looking all over the country. I did searches everywhere from New York to Miami to Tampa to Spokane down to Yuma and a lot of places in between. Right, Dallas, Hidalgo, Laredo, Houston, Baton Rouge. Just all over the place. I was looking at loads and looking at rates and kind of seeing what was going on today. So the Chicago market is terrible today. What's funny, Tommy, is the Chicago market was actually playing really well last week. Now, understand this, guys. There is a flow of trucks to market. So, case in point, last week, the Northwest was paying really good. Apples and onions coming out of there. Rates were really, really strong. About a week or week and a half of that, you see a lot of trucks moving up to capture some of that. Market gets flooded with trucks, rates are going to drop. So we still have to deal with the supply and demand component to this. So don't miss that piece of the puzzle. That still does happen, right? And so you'll see some of that, no doubt. And that can cause a pretty significant fluctuation in rates. But to see a massive fluctuation in rates, again, 20 to 40% drop, but we're still seeing pretty significant freight loads available in a lot of those areas. Again, as that guy, when he thought he had hung up, he said they're not buying it, as he kind of laughed about it. The problem is drivers are taking these garbage rates. Tommy, I do think there is a piece to that. Yeah, I think guys get really scared and really freaked out, and they think, man, I better grab this right now. Otherwise, it's not going to be here. Like I said, I did some of that today, not grabbing the rates, but just passing on them. And, a few hours later, those loads are still there, and I'm getting calls back from some of the brokers. Some of the loads I didn't, right? And I know for a fact that plenty of guys were taking some of that stuff. But again, right? I didn't freak out. Although there's a few times I was incredibly frustrated, but yeah. Nelda says in 5 minutes, no 10 minutes or some minutes, it will get soft. No, we don't. I did actually talk to Will. We exchanged some messages real briefly and stuff today about a couple loads. I had one that wasn't. It went into New York City, and I think it was paid pretty decent, like 7,300 or something like that. But I'm not a big fan of sending trucks into the Bronx. Greg Edmond says, had a broker tell him that this particular office is trying to match contract rates to secure more loads, right? Yeah, look, we're gonna hear all the excuses. Undoubtedly, we're gonna hear all of the excuses. Dan Litke says, good book, Merchants of Grain, about trade and Standard Oil. Yeah, when you start looking at a lot of that kind of stuff, it gets real interesting, right? Especially when you're talking about supply and demand, like in our business. What a Viking, how's it going? You would have taken it, throw it your way. Tommy Reese says, JB Hunt, Convoy Uber Dat, was bidding on and lost every load to a lower bid. There's a lot of that. Like I said, I was looking at some of those when you look at some of the loads, and it was sort of head scratching. It really was. Little Viking, how's it going? Let's see. Mark, the cutthroat. The cutthroat owner operator, not the big companies. There you go. Right. I think there's a couple pieces to this puzzle, Mark, and I think One, it is knowing truly what guys' costs are, right? Their cost per mile, their cost per day kind of thing when they're trying to determine loads. I think that's a big piece of the puzzle. And I think the other piece of the puzzle is I've had a lot of drivers talk over the months or years now about, when they take loads, and I'm telling you, 90% of them tell me that they just look for the best rate in that area. And they just figure out, well, if it's a good rate, I'm going into a really bad area, I'll just deadhead out, or I'll find something that's going to be, cheap freight. But when I blend those two runs together, then it's going to be okay. And I don't have so much of a problem with that. I had a driver call me. It's been probably a month or so ago. He had a run, and I don't remember the exact numbers. He had a run from Pennsylvania down into Florida, and it paid him really well. And I don't recall what the rate was. And he was frustrated because he was down in Florida, and he's getting some really bad rates. And he had an offer that came to him. And so as we talked through it, he said, "Am I looking at this wrong? Should I deadhead? Should I not?" And I said, "Look, when you blend those two rates together, if I called you, any of you guys, and I said, hey, I'm going to give you whatever, 2,500 miles, and I'm going to pay you guys an average of, I think it was like 222 is what sticks in my head, whatever, 222 on whatever these miles were. Would you feel like that's a good deal?" And for this driver, he was like, "Yeah, that's a good deal for me." Right? He knows what his cost per mile is. His cost per mile already has the salary based into it. I think there was 40 or 50 cents of profit per mile on top of his salary already that was encumbered in his cost per mile. And so he was like, "Yeah, it's a good deal." And so, well, that's exactly what you're getting, right? That's exactly how you look at it, right? You went Pennsylvania to Florida, Florida to wherever, and wherever it was a decent freight area, right? So it was going to pay him 222, and he was going to end up back in a good area. So that was a good deal. For those of you guys that want to look at it, I think that's a fine. I mean, I don't have any problem looking at it like that. And like I told him on that call, I said, "Look, if that broker called you and said, I've got a load from Pennsylvania, I've got a reload in Florida, and I'm going to send you back out of there, I'm going to pay you 222 all miles. Would you do that?" He was like, "Yeah, sure I would." So a lot of times our own perspective can get in the way of some of this, if that makes sense. Waiting for a door in Vermont over 2 hours now, less than 3 hours left on my 14. Isn't that just so special? Tommy says he disagrees with that. Why take cheap freight just because, I can? Why not want to make more money, Scott? Do you think the race to the bottom is okay because you can? And I don't think the race to the bottom is okay. I do think it is about managing your revenues and your profitability, right? So your options, right, to deadhead. So if you're talking about that example there with the guy coming out of Pennsylvania, Tommy, he goes down to Pennsylvania and does really well. Okay, and he was looking at deadheading out. Where are you going to deadhead out? He was looking to deadhead like 600 or 700 miles. Okay, well, the rate that he was getting, and again, it's been long enough that I can't recall the exact numbers. But he was going to deadhead 600 or 700 miles out, and he was still going to be just in okay rates, right? It wasn't like it was going to be paying him, $2.50 a mile, $3 a mile, right? It was just okay. So why deadhead, right? 700 miles just to find yourself in an okay rate. Now, some guys, your business, do what you want, right? I would rather get fuel and some costs covered if it's going to put me in a space where I'm going to be back into good rates, right? So I don't have a problem looking at that total run, those two legs, if you will, as a total profitability. That's me, right? That's me. There are times when I deadhead. I think I was talking the other night in a video where I had a guy in Pennsylvania and deadhead him 600 miles. I did that because we had a time frame that we were up against. It was Christmas Eve. We deadheaded him 600 miles, but we still got I don't remember what it was, 2 something on all miles. It was still ended up good. Driver got back home the day before Christmas Eve, so it worked out perfect. Those are circumstances that we all deal with from time to time, whatever it may be. In some cases, it might not be Christmas Eve, it might be a birthday or some other holiday, or you just want to be home for whatever. So again, I don't view it as a race to the bottom. What I can tell you is it's really rare when somebody gets $2 a mile coming out of Florida for anything, right? Aside from the 6 weeks when Florida's hot, right? Because those 6 weeks, the rates going into Florida are poor. So to me, it really is all about managing your business, your profit, covering your costs, and making as much as you can. And I think when we looked at that circumstance from Pennsylvania to Florida, out to, again, I can't recall where it went to. It landed him in a really good area. and he made, in his mind, really good money on all the miles. So I don't have a problem with that. John Bearden, that's funny. Dashcan Sam, Hunts Point ain't as bad as it used to be. That's right. I was looking at a load going in or coming out of there just a little while ago. Consistency. Need to be the Tony Gwynn, no doubt, right? For sure. Instead of Jose Canseco. Man, I tell you, Spectre, you're absolutely right, especially this time of year, man. This time of year is when those that know their costs pay really close attention to the details, and they take their time and they make just quality decisions, and they try not to end up in bad areas. And if you're going to end up in a bad area, carry your backhaul with you, right? Right. I mean, we all say that relative to Florida or Texas and California and places like that get really sketchy at times. And if I'm going to take my backhaul with me, fine. If somebody wants to pay me to come out of there and pay for my fuel and make some profit, then I'm okay with that too at times, right? There are times when I'll deadhead out for sure. But generally speaking, again, I've ran the numbers. We talked about this a lot on my first channel. The numbers tell you to take the load, right? The numbers tell you to take that load out of Florida versus, versus just deadheading. Again, assuming you're going in there kind of often. Right. If you go in there, whatever, 8-10 times a year, the numbers will tell you, the profitability numbers will tell you that you should take the load out of there. Right. I'm not saying don't search for something that, out of the Carolinas, Atlanta, Birmingham, something like that, Tennessee. I'm not saying don't search to try to find that really good run that maybe warrants deadheading. I'm not suggesting that you don't do that. I'm just saying if you don't find anything that's particularly attractive, then the numbers tell you to go ahead and load. And guys, let me just say it. I despise taking, those loads more than anybody. I just know that the numbers say it's the right thing to do, right? I don't know that makes it any more palatable or tolerable, right? I still hate it just as much as anybody. But I would rather have somebody pay for me to get out of there than me pay to get out of there. Man, I think that's where I swear that's where it was going. I don't know if Robert's in here or not. That's where that load was going. It was going into the Bronx. It was 771 something or other street address in the Bronx. And I talked to two drivers. I was like, "Do you guys want to go? I really am not interested in sending somebody there, but if you guys want to go, we'll go." And both drivers were like, "Yeah, no, we're good. We don't want to go. We don't want to go." But hey, if anybody wants that load, then send me an email and I can give you the broker's information. It was what was it? It was going somewhere out of Idaho, I think it was. Perlicker says we've talked before about getting out of Florida, and I left home yesterday and have a combined rate of $1,200 to Atlanta, 2 loads, same 700 miles. And that's a really good point that you bring up. So for those of you guys that are lease op or owner ops, you guys have that ability to take some of those shorter runs, right? For a company driver, we have less flexibility when it comes to those options because we are required. I say required. We're not required, but our drivers certainly want us to give them a decent amount of miles each week. And so if I'm running them on some of those shorter runs, that's profitable for me, but not them, then that's not such a good thing. And so for us, it's a little bit more difficult. But yeah, we've talked about that before, and you're right. If you guys have the option, take some of those shorter runs, and then maybe you can either deadhead out of there or take one last run, however it is you want to do it. But yeah, that's another option. We did some of that last week, again, as I had the individual that was up in the Northeast for the doctor's appointment. We tried to run them around on some of the shorter runs. They understood and they were cool with that for that particular time frame while they're trying to keep them around so that we ensured that they didn't miss their doctor's appointment. And so we just kind of offset some costs or paid differently for that week for them so that they didn't get screwed, and hopefully we didn't. But yeah, there's a lot of options relative to that. People lie, numbers don't. That's true as long as the numbers, are correct, right? I think that's where we got to be careful. with the numbers. A lot of guys, I think, some of the numbers I've seen when guys pull together spreadsheets or things of that nature can be a little sketchy. And guys, just remember always, it is a really good habit to include a salary. As we've talked before, I don't care if it's 40 grand or 70 grand, whatever that salary is, burden that cost of your salary. So if you want $70,000, and you plan on driving about 100,000 miles a year, that's about 70 cents. Burden that cost right into your cost per mile. That way, like this driver that called me when he was going Pennsylvania, Florida, back out, and when I asked him, I said, okay, so what he was saying his break-even cost was, well, his break-even cost actually included a salary for him, right? So it wasn't like it was break-even as many guys run their cost, right? So if you're running a true break-even and you're not paying yourself, that's a whole different game, right? So you want to make sure and burden. Sorry, another phone call. I totally forgot to turn it off. I apologize. Let's see if that was a broker. They'll call right back. We'll see how that goes. I operate intrastate, and I stay in the 225 to 250. I take a lot of negotiations every day. Man, isn't that the truth, Jose? A lot of truth to that. And man, I was doing a whole lot of that today. I don't know how many calls I made and received today, but it was a lot. It was a lot more than I was making and receiving latter half of last week. But the brokers know it too, right? I mean, the brokers are reaching out and they're trying. They're trying hard to cover that stuff. But I'm just telling you guys, if those of you guys are late coming in, I called we ship products. So I called the broker and asked them what they would charge me to go from Kansas City to, was it Chicago, or I forgot where it was now. Kansas City somewhere, because I'd also called on a load from the same broker as a carrier, where we were trying to move that load. They were offering us basically $1.75 is what the guy said. I mean, we didn't get through the conversation. He's like, and we're paying this, right? And that turned out to be like $1.75. And when I called the same brokerage and told them I had a load to ship, they were charging over $4. So the market's not softening, right? At least not as much as we're being led to believe. I'm not saying it's not going to get soft. I'm just saying today, this is what I saw and this is what we experienced. So take that for what it's worth. Vinny says his guys get paid 25% of the rate con. They're just as happy to take short runs. That's a really good way to structure that, right? So that nobody's getting hurt there. And sometimes some of those short runs can really pay dividends. No, I'm not saying that your 96 cents is too high. I'm saying it's probably too low, man. Or unless you're talking about your 96 cents for your, you're talking about your 96 cents for your cost, or excuse me, for your salary? No, man, that's awesome. If you can make 96 cents as your salary and you're happy with it, yeah. Whatever it is, man, I would just say burden it in there, right? And treat that as your cost. So Tommy, take care, buddy. You can go check your bids and see if you lost them all. Well, report back, let us know. When am I going to start a dispatching for profit class? Man, I don't know. I guess I don't know that I mean, to me, dispatching is not hard. It's just a little frustrating. It can be a little stressful. It's just really time consuming because it is a ridiculous amount of calls and text messages and emails and stuff like that. Guys, it's just about taking time to make sure that you're about to make the most right decision, right? Whenever we're going to buy a house or something like that, right? We want to make sure that we've got schools nearby, and the schools are quality schools, and the house doesn't back to a road, or all these sorts of things, right? We do all this due diligence, right? We should do the same due diligence when it comes to booking a load. It's just that our due diligence we can have that done in probably a 15-minute exercise. Assuming you have the tools, right? Again, we use truck stops, we use DAT, and some of that stuff. So for me, and again, what we do is a little bit different because we got some company guys, and we try to run those guys some decent miles. So. Look at that. Hey, can everybody just take a moment, please? Mr. Indiana Jack is in the house. Indiana, I saw a thumbnail of you. Did you get a new blue truck? Indiana Jack and a blue Mac? I thought that looked pretty sweet if it was. Sounds like very thin profit margins for owner ops. No wonder company pay sucks. Look, this is a low margin industry, no doubt about that, right? No doubt about it. But it's up to us to handle ourselves in a really professional manner, communicate, do all these things really well to add the value to increase those margins when push comes to shove. I can tell you guys, we moved some freight last week, right? And I mentioned this in yesterday's video, I think it was, or day before this video, where and how and the things that some of our drivers are doing to communicate and add value to the brokers. Some of those brokers are, I've sent them emails asking for some of those same loads, and they're willing, and they're essentially willing to pay us almost the same rate that we got last week for those loads. Everybody else is, cutting their price, $1,000, $2,000. Right. And these guys are willing to do that. In fact, I received a phone call today from a broker that said, hey, you guys took a couple loads for Matt in our office. Matt has been raving about your drivers. I've got this load. Would you guys be interested? Right. So when you add value and you do things different than the rest of the people in our industry, your name stands out, or your company name or your driver's name stands out. And isn't that what we want? People calling you to make, to give you offers. Look, I haven't looked at this load. I didn't even know that this guy's load existed. Okay, but he did, and he wanted a good truck. He was willing to pay good money, but he wanted a good truck. He didn't want to have to babysit somebody. Turns out we didn't have a truck that was, kind of in the area to really make it work. But again, that's just really what it's about. So yeah, margins can be thin, and margins are about to get really thin over the next probably 6 or 8 weeks, right? And so you guys need to be making quality decisions on your route plan, looking at weather, looking at fuel costs, right? Looking at the rate for the area that you're coming out of. And if it's a short, 600, 1,200 mile kind of run or whatever, or for the guys that are lease op and owner ops, mileage doesn't really matter. It's more about the timing of it, of things. Make sure that you're going to get loaded and unloaded in a reasonable amount of time, right? A lot of these brokers tend to think in terms of rate per mile, right? You see that on a lot of the load boards. Hey, this rate is whatever, $3.16 a mile, right? It's a short run. It goes from here to there. Sometimes those can be really good for you guys that are lease op or owner ops. Just make sure that, if it's paying $3.16 a mile and it's a short, whatever, 400-mile run, make sure it doesn't get unloaded 3 days later, right? There's a lot. I mean, it's really strange. I don't typically run into as many multi-stop runs as I have in the past week or so. There's been quite a few, multiple stop runs, right? And so make sure that the revenue is there for you guys. QXXI says, is there software that tells the driver which loads to accept? Yeah, there's a lot of the softwares, but if you're talking about like an owner operator looking to help tell them which load to take, not that I know of. No, I mean it's really up to each individual. Yeah, that's right, Spectre. They are tight, and they're going to get tighter over the next, like I said, 6 to 8 weeks for sure. Oh no, just a tour. Okay, I'll have to watch it. I actually, I think those. I'd be curious what your take on it was, Indiana Jack, because I think they look like they kind of look like a nice truck actually for a Mac. I thought it looked pretty nice. Lego truck. That's funny. So anyways, look, that's my 2 cents, guys, right? Again, we all agree and we all know that February's coming and we do expect to see freight volumes drop. I'm just telling you that the freight volumes in the areas that I was looking, which was most of the country today, there were still a lot of loads. Be diligent, make your offer, do your research on what you're offering. If they give you a ridiculously low offer, go ahead and make an offer to them professional, give them your number, give them your MC number or DOT number, whatever. Call them back if things change, right? And but understand that, for me, my game plan over the next, probably for the rest of this week, I'm going to post my trucks a couple days in advance, just like I always do. I'm going to take the calls. If I get a fair rate, then I'll take it. If not, I'm going to wait till the day of, because what I saw today when I posted trucks available today, the rates were not significantly cheaper, right? They were what they had been in the past couple of weeks, right? So it appears, at least right now, that maybe this is just some manipulation, some gamesmanship. Is that going to be the case come this Friday? I don't know. Let's follow up Friday and see how it looks. But for now, that's it. I hope this is helpful to some of you guys. Really, for more than anything, I'm just trying to suggest that, the sky really isn't falling yet. Not to say that maybe it won't in a couple more weeks, but it's not yet. So keep your head up, do your homework, and prepare for the prepare your business plan for those runs accordingly, and hopefully you guys can be profitable with it. All right. So with that is it. I got a few calls to return, and we'll kill it. Look at this.